Hello and welcome to Shaking and Sipping. This is the show where we shake up or otherwise prepare a cocktail or mixed drink, talk about its history, look at some variants, have a sip, and see how it is. This week we're continuing our quest to work through the IBA's official list of cocktails to see how those stack up. We're in the second section, the contemporary classics, and it's rather hot today, so I'm happy to announce that this week's classic is the Tequila Sunrise. Now, the Tequila Sunrise is certainly a drink that I think belongs on this list and in the classics. Not sure if it's quite as popular as some others, but it's certainly a drink that most folks have heard of, many folks certainly have tried, and even time period-wise, while it is technically probably early enough that it could have been in the previous section, it's not like several of the recent weeks' drinks that are, go back to the 19th century easily. This one does come from the late 20s, early 30s, so it's kind of in the right ballpark for here. Now, we've actually mentioned the drink before, sort of indirectly when talking about something else. Before we get to that, there's a go-to story for this that's become popular in the past decade or so. It's on the Wikipedia page, there's some newspaper articles about it and stuff. It cites this drink to some bartender at a hotel in Arizona, the Biltmore or something. There's no evidence that this is true. The earliest report of such a thing is from like 2000 or 2001. It's just not true. So if you've heard that story, just forget about that story. Where you may remember hearing of it here, sort of in passing, is when we discussed the margarita history. And we were discussing David Wondrich's musings on the origins of margaritas. And in there he mentions this place down in Tijuana called the Agua Caliente. And this was at various times it was a hotel, a casino, a horse racing track. It was this whole complex. I think there's still a dog track there today. I'm not sure that the rest of it is still a thing, but it was a spa, hotel, bar, whole package deal. And there are mentions from that time of people ordering these tequila daisies there. And so we talked about how that might have been the margarita, because margarita means daisy in Spanish. We talked about how a margarita could really be seen as a variant on a sort of late 19th century daisy. However, we also mentioned, I don't know if I quoted that part out of Imbibe, there was some sort of changes that had been happening to the daisy into the beginning of the 20th century that had other things being added to it differently from what we'd see in a traditional daisy. And if that were the sort of daisy they were talking about, what it would really be is something very similar to what we're going to see as a Tequila Sunrise. And indeed, although that's a little bit earlier, coming from that same area, and in 1934, Agua Caliente published their own book, which is quite a zany, wacky book called Bottoms Up, and has recipes, but all sorts of info and all sorts of stuff going on. Has a drink in there by 1934 called the Sunrise Tequila. It's also referenced a year or two previously in another book about cocktails popular with the Hollywood crowd and in Southern California and things. And there's good reasons to think that this drink, called something like the Sunrise Tequila, was available at the Agua Caliente and possibly other establishments in that area by 1930, if not perhaps a couple years earlier. The only other really early reference that people sometimes point out is there is a drink called the Sunrise in Craddock's Savoy Cocktail Book, which is 1930, seems to come up every single week on the program. That's an unrelated drink. I think maybe the name comes for similar reasons, there being sort of a gradation of color. It goes from a dark color up to yellow chartreuse, so it has that same sort of ombre sort of thing, but that's a weird layered shot that doesn't sound good. No reason to think there's any connection to that. Now, the initial version of the Tequila Sunrise, or Sunrise Tequila as they were then calling them, has quite a bit of difference from the modern version. There's tequila in it, so we got that part the same, and generally grenadine, but there's no orange yet, which is the main ingredient of the modern version. What seems that happened is there's sort of a mid-ground between the modern version and that historical version. And we're going to tell that story with a few references to music. The Kingston Trio, and or their producer or production company, it's some whole convoluted thing, opened a restaurant called the Trident in Sausalito, California. In 1970, someone called Bobby Lozoff, something, was working there as a bartender, and he created a version of the Tequila Sunrise, which appears to have added the orange juice and possibly slightly tweaked some other things. In 1972, the Rolling Stones were preparing to go on a major American tour. They stopped by. Lozoff asked Mick Jagger if he would like to try a thing called the Tequila Sunrise. Mick Jagger said yes, and he liked them so much that informally among the band, they all refer to that tour as the Cocaine and Tequila Sunrise Tour. And yes, I know that this is not the right album. This should be Exile on Main, but I don't have it. And this is 1971. Come on, cut me some slack. This drink became popular even more so at that point, possibly due to the Stones ordering it everywhere they went, and the popularity of this restaurant in California, and so on and so forth, to the point where the Eagles, Why Do I Own This Album? No one knows, created a popular song in 1973 called Tequila Sunrise. The drink was becoming so popular at this point that it was the drink on the back of all of the bottles of Jose Cuervo tequila, rather than margaritas, which is what you'll normally see there today if you see a recipe at all. And so that Jose Cuervo recipe is simpler and very similar to the modern IBA spec. Don't know if they created it, but that's certainly sort of the popularity direction in which that went. All right, that was a lot of words about the Tequila Sunrise, which is a drink that, even after all that, it's not a drink I'm incredibly hyped about. I think the first version kind of rules. By the time we get to the end, it's so much orange juice that I don't recall being that excited by it, but I have not had one in a while. So I'm excited to make 3 versions for you today. We're going to try to get real close to that 1929, 1930 Agua Caliente version. Then we're going to do Bobby's version from 1972, and then we'll make the IBA spec. Let's get right to it. All right, so first of all, this is the wrong glass. These are pretty much always going to be made in a standard highball glass, but I only have 2 of those, and we're using those for the other versions. And this is a tequila glass. Not that I'm using El Jimador or making a Paloma today, but we're just going to go with it. So this drink's a little bit possibly weird, depending on how you make them, if you've made them before. But we are going to essentially just build these and sort of give just a very light stir at the end. And we're going to not necessarily build it in the order that you might think makes sense entirely, but let's just go for it here. We're going to start off with a Blanco tequila. I'm using Espoir. We've got 45 milliliters. Then we're juicing a lime. I want about 15 milliliters. Then we're going to add in 7 or 8 milliliters of Grenadine. That's about a 1/4 ounce. I'm not sure if I've been doing ounce conversions so far. If not, that was 1.5 ounces, half ounce, 1/4 ounce. And then finally, just a bit of Crème de Cassis. Their measurement is 2 dashes. I've seen people convert that as something like a 1/16 of an ounce. I'm going to use about half a bar spoon. Then I'm actually kind of late on this. They call for, when adding the lime juice, to add its peel directly into the drink. I'm going to also express it. And then finally, they say to top with soda water. Now, they had a specific mineral water that was part of their whole Agua Caliente spa experience thing. And I think it was slightly saltier than your average water. Q has a little bit of salt added to it, so I think it'll be fine. But we'll pour in about that amount. We certainly don't want to fill this glass because this glass is just way too big. And then it says to just give a quick stir. I think that's really all they want, because this is the sort of sunrise, really more of a sunset, that you got from the original Tequila Sunrise. It's going from a really deep dark purple up through to a pinkish, up to almost a white. And that, I do believe, is very roughly an Agua Caliente Sunrise Tequila circa 1930. So a lot of lime and just this little bit of, I don't know, it's all citrus family stuff, but there's just a little bit more happening there. There's a little bit of hair on it. So that's kind of interesting. Yeah, it's kind of weird. So the front of your tongue, not much happens. There's this slight bit of some sort of sweet, slightly tart thing, but it's really quick. I think it's the lime. And then immediately I get pretty much a full read on the tequila. I get this little bit of butteriness, a little bit of grassiness, lingering sort of dark, sort of slightly leathery thing happening. And then sort of washing over the top of that, I notice the carbonation again, and I get this sweet fruity twist, which is, you know, the Grenadine and the Cassis. Yeah, and that just happens right at the end, and then I end on a note of lime. You just have this nice poking sort of citrus thing just hanging out for the finish again. That's really different than what I was expecting. Kind of good. I'd say better than I was expecting. I would say this is actually a really cool place to play with different tequilas because so much of that character comes through. You could really sample a lot of different tequilas this way. All right, next up, welcome to the 70s. We're going to start with a highball glass with some ice in it. And here our building instructions are a little bit different. So the idea on this one is we're going to start with our syrups, and both the Cassis and the Grenadine are still in this one, unlike a lot of modern recipes. Then we're going to shake together the other ingredients and then add those. I don't necessarily love that, but I think it'll work out with the ice in there. We'll give it a shot. All right, so this version cuts back the Grenadine a little bit, but actually edges up the Cassis a little bit. And so what you're looking for is something like 5 milliliters, something like 1/6 of an ounce. That's going to be, depending on your bar spoon, a sort of full to overflowing bar spoon. I'll put just a dot more. I think they may have honestly even gone heavier on these at the time, but I just cannot imagine doing so. This is already a little more than I think we need. All right, now into our shaker tins. We're looking for another 15 milliliters or ½ ounce of lime juice. And the juice of lemon, or an orange. I always confuse the two for some reason. And of this orange, I want 75 milliliters. That's going to be about 2 1/2 ounces. You can definitely double strain this, or strain this now and then later, if you want to avoid all that little bit of pulp and pith. I don't really mind, we'll see, maybe I'll double strain it after the shake. Now we're going to throw in about 22 milliliters of a dry orange Curaçao. This is certainly not in all recipes, but it does show up sometimes. You could sub a triple sec here, or a Cointreau as well. It's about 3/4 of a fluid ounce. And finally, the recipe I have calls for a Tequila Reposado. I've got this ancient bottle of Cazadores that I am reluctant to finish off because I just love how ugly this bottle is, but this might be the day. It's 45 milliliters, or about 1.5 fluid ounces of a Tequila Reposado. You can certainly use a Blanco here as well. In the 70s, they were using Lord knows what, so you're fine. That's all there is to it. We're going to grab some ice and shake it up. All right, and then so the goal is to add this without entirely mixing that, right? We want a little bit of mixture happening, a little bit of an ombre, but we don't want to fully combine it. Doing it in this order makes that slightly difficult. The only way to really float down there is to have a floating spoon, which is like a bent backwards long spoon, which I don't have or use. So there's really no purpose in trying to do it here because it's just too high up. So basically that's not going to do anything. So I'm just going to rely on pouring onto the ice here to keep my separation. So that will let us make this work. Get that right up to the brim. Want an orange twist. Some people will also throw a maraschino cherry in here, which seems like a fine idea to me. And then some folks like to give it just a slight stir to try to get that color coming up a little bit and to prevent the bottom from being just an entirely grenadine syrup kind of vibe. I'm gonna give it one sip without it, and then I'll give it just a very light stir to see. On the nose is orange, orange, and orange. Yeah, so that's not bad. It's too far to orange. Orange and tequila together, especially Reposado, tons of vanilla. So this has some real creamsicle vibes. Orange and vanilla is really all I get between the Curaçao, the Reposado, and orange. Yeah, very creamsicle vibe. Too much orange. I like the amount of sort of vanilla that I'm generating, but it's a lot. Okay, so with just a bit of light agitation there, I'm not sure how well that comes across, but I do have a little bit more of a gradient. So that's a different thing. I'm not sure if it's better or worse. It's less unabashedly creamsicle. I am getting now a little bit of currant and a little bit more tartness. Yeah. I don't feel that strongly about it. It's not honestly that interesting to me. It lacks any kind of punch is my real only issue with it, is that I just don't have that tang I'd get out of a margarita. And there's nothing spirit forward. There's nothing, it's just a little bit too safe. It's sweet, vanilla, hint of tartness, and that's it. It's not moving me, but it's not bad. All right, for our final version, we're gonna make the IBA spec. And for this one, there was a bit of a disaster moments ago. And so I'm out of properly sized ice cubes. We're gonna have this weird hodgepodge of different sizes and shapes of ice cube. This one is by far the simplest. There's really not much going on here. There's not even much you do to actually put it together. So we're gonna start off with 45 milliliters of slightly dyed purple tequila from some Grenadine or whatever. And this one feels like a very smooth sort of processed drink, so I'm going to go ahead and strain this one. That's 60 milliliters, or 2 fluid ounces. And another 30, bringing us up to 90 milliliters, or 3 fluid ounces of orange. So now we've lost the lime juice, we've lost the Curaçao. We don't even stir this or shake this or anything. It's just, that is what it is. Then we're going to get, since this is a drink that I'm just not that excited about how and why it's made, we're going to use the good old Rose's Grenadine. Go back and watch many of our episodes if you want to see us make homemade Grenadine and talk about why this product's not very good. But this recipe calls for a frankly shocking 15 milliliters, or half an ounce. We're just going to try to sink that. As you can see, we have that lovely color shift happening, which is great. Whether there's going to be much else great to say about it or not, I sort of have my suspicions. I do want another bit of zest for this. And I don't have any other fresh lemon or oranges handy, so I'm just going to grab a little bit here. And this is the IBA spec Tequila Sunrise. Orange, orange, and orange. That's so nothing. It's just aggressively nothing. There's like this slight bit of orange, and then there's tequila, but it's not like in the first one where I was really experiencing the tequila in an interesting way. Now it just feels like the tequila's fighting with the orange. It's not really, this Blanco's not integrating as well in the vanilla sense. I still get some, but it's further back. Front of palate's just a mess. It's not characteristically orange enough. A little bit of fighting from the grassier notes in the tequila. Then I get just a hint of that nice vanilla thing, and then that's the end. This sucks. I mean, it's honestly, it's not the worst drink I've ever had, but it's just, the first one was so much better than I expected, fantastic. The second one I have issues with, but okay drink, not gonna mind finishing it on this hot day. This is just nothing. Drink. Well, thanks so much for coming along on this week's Sunrise Tequila Adventure. If you haven't tried one of these, I think certainly this first version is worth trying. I think even that second version is worth playing with. I think that personally, maybe I'd cut the orange back a little more, maybe cut back the cassis as well. I'm not sure. I'd have to play with it, but I think there is something there, certainly, and I think actually maybe adding a splash of soda water to that one wouldn't be bad to get kind of a cooler vibe. I could see things happening there. That third version, I mean, I'm sure you could make it better had I used the real Grenadine, had I better selected tequila maybe for it or something. It's just not as exciting. Without the lime, no liqueur, cheap Grenadine, no cassis, way too much orange. It just doesn't have the right balance going. So personally, I wouldn't try it, but if you like it or it looks right up your alley, give it a shot. Please do all the YouTube stuff, like, share, subscribe, comment, tell your friends, all that stuff I'm required to ask for. Visit the blog at shakingandsipping.com. We'll have a write-up on this and each other drink. Most weeks we'll have IBA in real life, where we go to a bar in Seattle the day after the video posts and find out if they make the drink a lot, if they have variants on it, etc. Not sure if we're doing that or not this week, but check back on the blog the day after this video's up, or follow on Twitter at shaking_sipping for those sorts of updates. Thanks so much for coming along this week. There's only 3 drinks left in this second section, and so we'll be getting through those in the next 3 weeks. We'll be back next week with the next drink. Until then, happy sipping. Cheers.